Asian equities recoup morning losses after Trump clarifies that the U.S. will honor trade deal with China. Key indices rise to the day's high, clocking almost 1% gains. Mid-cap index outperforms. President Trump imposes visa restrictions till the end of the year, and while NASSCOM critiques the move, industry players and analysts see little or negligible impact of the move. IT stocks recover from the losses. Capital goods and industrial stocks rally as curbs on China imports spur expectations of gains for Indian companies. L&T CEO voices support for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Relief for stressed companies. SEBI eases pricing rules for fundraising via preferential allotment. PSU Bank Index up over 3%. And as the COVID-19 count continues to mount in India after Chennai, Tamil Nadu seals Madurai and neighbouring areas, while 5 wards in Bengaluru are back in lockdown. A total lockdown will also be reimposed in Guwahati. Good afternoon and welcome to Business Lunch. I'm Sumera Abdi. For now, the market's doing okay, so about 1% in terms of a gain on the frontline indices. The mid-cap index faring marginally better. It's the financials where once again we're seeing the more gains. So the Nifty bank up 1%, but it's the PSU's banking stocks which are doing much better. As of now, the market breadth also firmly in favor of the stocks which are leading. But let's focus on the big news. The all-important Russia-India-China Trilateral meeting in Moscow is scheduled to begin shortly. My colleague Parikshit Luthra, who's been tracking this story very closely, joins in with the details, what's on the agenda and what we should generally be watching out for. Parikshit.
Well, the Russia-India-China Trilateral meeting is important because this is the first time that foreign ministers of India and China are meeting after the clashes at the border. There is going to be no bilateral discussion over there. There is going to be a discussion on COVID-19, and it's quite possible that there may be a reference on the border situation and China's aggression from the Indian side. Rajnath Singh is also in Russia right now. He will be holding talks with his Russian counterpart. Russian officials will be in touch with the Indian defense team as well. But the important news that we're getting in from the border, those talks that took place yesterday, talks in the Moldo region of the LAC between co-commanders of both sides, Lieutenant General Harinder Singh and Major General Liu Lin, they have been successful. In fact, sources in the army telling us that those talks were held in a cordial, positive and constructive atmosphere. There was a mutual consensus to disengage as well. This is an important statement because India had been speaking about disengagement all this while. We don't know about the terms of the disengagement. We're also learning that modalities for disengagement from all friction areas in eastern Ladakh were discussed in this 10-hour-long meeting. Remember, that meeting began at 11:30 a.m. Yesterday morning and it went on till about 9 p.m. last night. We're also told that the decisions taken in this disengagement meet will now be taken forward by both India and China. We're expecting a statement from the Foreign Ministry as well, because diplomatically we are in touch with the Chinese government too.
All right, Parikshit, thanks very much for joining in and filling us in on both. One, of course, is that India, China, Russia. There's a trilateral meeting that's due to begin shortly. And second is that the core commander level talks between India and China so far have progressed in a humane manner, you can say. All right, the other big news that we're tracking today, U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed fresh visa restrictions till the end of the year. That's the H-1B visa, amongst others. Kritika Saxena, our correspondent who tracks all things IT, joins in with the details. Kritika.
Well, yes, the extension is till the 31st of December of the suspension of H-1B, H-2J as well as L visa. Now, essentially, this applies to all those who do not have an effective non-immigrant visa or all those who are outside the US at this point. So what this means is that fresh visas get impacted, renewals get impacted only if your contract or your visa expired around April. You'd come back to India and you weren't in US and you were waiting for the lockdown to get over to renew your visa. Only then does your renewal get impacted. renewal for all those workers in US is not going to be impacted. So that's a very important clarity. There are some exceptions to those involved with food supply chain and those whose entry is required in national interest. So over here, what immigration lawyers say is that on a case-to-case basis, if there was an IT worker, for instance, who was working in a security contract or in a healthcare contract or education, which was in national interest or that contributed to helping in the COVID-19 pandemic, then that could be looked at, but that is going to happen on a case-to-case basis. Now, the point over here is, what does this mean for Indians and Indian IT? Indians, about 240,000 get impacted, yes, but if you look at the numbers, nearly 70% of the 85,000 odd visas issued each year are to Indians, yes, but a significant portion of this goes to US companies. For instance, in FY19, 7 out of the top 10 recipients of H-1B visas were US companies. Share of the Indian companies among the top 10 visas dropped to 24% from 51%, and that's between 2016 to 2019. Even TCS and Infosys have reduced their exposure from about 70 to 80% to 40 to 50%. HCL Tech and Wipro are at 30 to 35%. So effectively, the temporary suspension doesn't hit Indian IT as much. What would hit us is the fact that H-1B visa is now going to be made merit-based, and they're looking at reforming the H-1B visa process system. So once we come out of the pandemic, once we come to the other side of this year, we could perhaps see stricter norms, and that will basically mean more local hiring and increased costs.
All right, Kritika, thanks much. We also caught up with top industry voices, CP Gurnani, MD and CEO of Tech Mahindra, and Shivendra Singh of NASSCOM to understand what they're making and what the impact could likely be for Indian companies.
The impact on India, or at least the Indian companies, will definitely be less in a short term, and in a long term, I think, I am convinced that America needs the technology prowesses and the hunger of immigrant population. And as long as they remember that it is not an immediate work, it is not going to lead to any disruption, and for a long term, they would need the talent. H1 application and what is called the lottery system, India's own applications reduced. Earlier, we used to send our leading architects to US to work with the client and design new systems. Now what we do is we actually work through the cloud, through the collaborative tools like MS Teams or WebEx, and actually allow the architects to be based in India.
Technology workers play a very critical role in the COVID recovery, whether it's in the management of hospitals, whether it's in terms of the production of vaccines which are going on, in terms of hospital security, cyber security, and many other areas, online education as well. Tech workers are definitely important to the economic recovery and in terms of the COVID recovery, which is more immediate.
And it's the 17th straight day that oil companies have increased the prices of petrol and diesel. This takes the cumulative increase to a steep 8.5 rupees for petrol and over 10 rupees now for diesel. Sonal Bhutra joins in with the numbers and the impact. Sonal.
Well, yes, a hike in petrol and diesel prices is not so positive for all the consumers, but it definitely is a positive news for the oil marketing companies. Now remember, it is the 17th consecutive hike in petrol and diesel prices. In last 17 days, petrol prices have been hiked by 8.5 rupees per litre, diesel by 9.7 rupees per litre, and right now diesel and petrol prices are hovering around that 80 rupees per litre mark. In fact, the spread between the diesel and petrol prices has also reduced because of the uneven price hikes that we are seeing. But this definitely is a positive news for OMCs, because remember, since the time government has hiked excise duty on petrol and diesel, these companies were not really passing it on but absorbing that hike. And now since they are passing it on to the consumers, gross marketing margins for diesel has increased to 3.9 rupees per litre. For petrol, it has been increased to 3.6 rupees per litre. These are gross margins. And if we net it off for BS6 premium, now margins are back to the normalized level levels of 2.5 to 3 rupees per litre, which is positive. And yes, that is why these stocks will be in focus also, because the refining capacity utilization has improved for these companies because demand is coming back slowly. So all these are the tailwinds for the companies as of now.
Sonal, thanks much. A quick break. Up next, SEBI eases the pricing rules for fundraising via preferential allotment. More on that when we return. Stay tuned.